Well, anyway, John wanted me to teach for a couple weeks because you heard what he said about his job is really tying him down and kind of keeping him, he's on the road 3 days a week, and that's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive over and back each way, so quite a bit of time out of his life. So anyway, as I was sitting down this week and I was I was kind of looking up at what's in the world today, and all the stuff that's going on this week with the new Pope, and I guess I shouldn't watch the news anymore.
Yeah,
but sometimes I'm addicted to it. Okay, and it seemed like the whole world is just, this is the most wonderful thing that's happened. There's 1.4 billion Catholics in the world. Okay, and so that's probably the biggest Christian group out there. Maybe if you had a denomination, I don't know how to divide up the denominations of all of the church systems out there, but
it's the mother.
When I started thinking about this, and I thought, look what, and don't get me wrong, we all came out of something, all right? And my mother was Lutheran, which, that's pretty close to Catholicism. I think it's just a branch down or a branch up, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but she never, she once in a while she would tell us about different things, but her thing was that she wanted us each to think on our own, and so went to a lot of community churches, Christian churches throughout the years, and I was in the Mormon church for a while, for 3 or 4 years. And about 1972, I came to a conclusion, and I know that this might sound really bad, but I decided that churches were no good, and I wasn't going to give any money to them, that what they were teaching was all about money, because that's what it seemed like everybody wanted was money. And so when you look at the churches today, the richest nation in the world is the Catholic Church, okay? And they're still out there trying to get people to donate to them to give so they can take care of the poor, when they've got plenty of money to take care of the poor if they just did it on their own. So who do they go to do that? They go to the government, our governments, and the governments around the world, and get behind them and try to get their people to give them our money that we pay in taxes, So that's just my thinking of it. And so I wasn't being mean, but I know when me and Carol got married, she thought I was an atheist or something, and I told her, I said, you don't understand. I said, I'm a believer. I said, I read the Bible. But I said, I'm not going to get into no religion with any people, so any church, I'm not going to get involved. When I got into this, it was different because I never looked at it as a religion. I just looked at it as building a relationship. So anyway, when I was looking at all this stuff today, and I was thinking about what a rebellious bunch of people the world is, right? And so that's how I come to, I thought, boy, I even got the right Torah portion for it, and then I found out I'm a month early. But Korah's rebellion, okay? And you all know in Numbers 16, if you want to turn there, Numbers 16 is about Korah's rebellion. And a little bit about Korah. We know the genealogy of all these people. So when we look at the Levi, or Louis, the man that had 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Mary, however you want to pronounce it. I'll use the names that I can pronounce, even if there might not be correct, because I've seen, and just in this study, I've seen about 10 different spellings for Korach, okay, and different ways to pronounce it. But anyway, so we know that the middle son of Levi was selected as the priestly line. And that man's first son was Amram, and then he had Yitzhar, and then 2 other sons. So the firstborn of Amram was Aaron, and of course Miriam, and then, but they don't put the ladies in there in the genealogy, they only put the, you know, if it wasn't for the ladies, there wouldn't be any genealogy, but they don't put them in there. So it was Aaron and Moses, and then the second son had 4 sons, but the firstborn was Korach. So Korach and Moses and Aaron were cousins, okay? Their dads were their opposite uncles. So Korach was in this, what he believed and he could see was, at the time that when they were coming out of Egypt, he understood that they were a specific group of people that were chosen, okay? Because it was always about the Levites. They were the ones that were being put forth as the leaders, and especially with Moses. So when he comes, if you guys turn to number 16, and just a minute now, I'll pull it up here. Put my pad in here and I can't find it. How about that? Okay. Number 16. It says, and Korach, son of Issachar, son of Kuath or Kohath, son of the Lui, took both Dathan, Abram, and the sons of Abaliah and Om, and the son of Perez, all sons of Reuben. And they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, called ones, leaders of the congregation, called ones of the meeting of men's name. So you got Korah, and then all of a sudden you got this group of people that are from the tribe of Reuben. So Reuben, if you recall, was the firstborn of Jacob, of Israel, okay? We'll call him Israel for this. But he was the firstborn of Israel. But he lost his birthright when he went into the bed of one of the concubines. It was, I think it was his mother's concubine, wasn't it? Or was it Bethel? Anyway, so he lost his birthright. So now you got 2 people here. Korah put himself on the same level as Aaron and Moses because he was a firstborn and Aaron was a firstborn. Moses was one that was put in charge, and he was looking at it that maybe he should be in the same level because they're all from a priestly line. Their grandfather, all right? So those people, he must have had a burr under his saddle or something, and he really thought that he should be on an equal basis. But when you look at now, how did Reuben, all these descendants of Reuben get into it? Was because Reuben, these people were looking at how far down the line they were put. You have to remember when you look in Bereshit, in Genesis, when you're looking at that, you look and find how it's happened. He was pretty much lost his seed. He was kind of a disgrace to his father, right? I would think that would last for a while. And then when you get to Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh, and he gave them the birthright. Mm-hmm. So he took Reuben's birthright and gave it to Ephraim. Mm-hmm. And then Manasseh was after that. So I don't know where Reuben was. He went down the chain pretty good, and probably far enough down that it hurt, okay? So you could see that these people were probably seeing the same kind of rebellious attitude about, yeah, look at us, our father was a firstborn, look where we're at, look what we're not doing. But if you look at Korach, the distinction that he had, these people, his group of people, were assigned a very important role in the moving of the tabernacle and building the tabernacle. Mm-hmm. Under the guidance of Eleazar, Aaron's, thirdborn, but put into the first position because the two other sons, if you look at Numbers 10, it tells you about Nadab and Abidiah dying. Okay, so that took them out of the picture. And so Eleazar was the priestly line. When you look at the priestly line, it went from Aaron to Eleazar, and to Eleazar, it didn't go on. And when Eleazar died, it would be his son, which was Phinehas. And that's where we kind of lose track of when you get into Joshua, when you see Phinehas would have been the high priest at the time, but it's not mentioned. So there was never after Joshua died, Joshua died, Eleazar died, then Phinehas was to become high priest. It kind of just faded away. There was never a high priest because the tabernacle kind of disappeared. That's a completely different teaching, and you have to, it's a lot of conjecture when you try to piece that in, but somehow the entire tabernacle disappeared. That whole thing disappeared during the time of Samuel and the first Kings. But anyway, so you have this group of people that are trying to put themselves at the same level, okay? And Eleazar was in charge of how the tabernacle was built. Once it was designed, you all read in Exodus, we all read how the step-by-step of how Yahuwah gave the directions. He gave a picture to Moses, he embedded it in him, and he also put it into the people that were building it, so that it was built exactly the way he wanted it. So when they took that down, it had to go down a certain way, okay? The first thing that they took down was the outer walls. And those were loaded onto wagons, and all the curtains and the outer walls of the entire tabernacle and then of the tent of meetings, okay? Those walls were taken down and put it on wagons, and the altar and the wash basin was all put on wagons and hauled in wagons, and they went out following Yehuda's, the first three groups of people that Yehuda led. And then the second thing was when they would take down the walls, they would drop the curtains over the most holy place, the meeting place where the witness and the altar of incense were, okay? So that nobody ever seen that mercy seat, the Ark of the Witness. Once it was set in there, the only people that ever saw it was Aaron, Moses, and Eleazar, okay? And Aaron, if you look at it, he went in there daily because he had to put incense on the altar for morning and evening when he tended the candles, which were out in the first part of the tent of meetings, okay? So in the first part of the tent of meetings, you had the showbread on the, showbread on the right and the menorah on the left, okay? Anyway, those things were hand carried. They were never put on a wagon, okay? So there was a group of men that had to carry the mercy seat, which was the Ark of the Witness, and it was completely covered, as all they had was the handle sticking out. They'd never seen it, okay? They would carry that, and they would be led with the altar, or the menorah, and the showbread. They were carried by hand. That was Korach's job, his people, okay? So that might have fit into it too, because remember, those things were gold. They were heavy. The altar of incense was all gold. The menorah was gold. So those things were heavy. So they had people carry those. So they had to carry those if it was a 2-day move, or a 3-day move, or a 4-day move. You had to, when we look at this, we read it simply that this was they just picked up and moved, and then they set up camp. But they were spread out for miles, each stage of these, how they were set up. If you read in Numbers, it gives you an exact order of how everything went out of how it was taken down and put up. So when the people that was carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Witness, or it could be called the Testimony, and you all remember the 2 Ark teachings, right? Okay. So when they got there with that Ark, the building was sitting there, and they would set it down, and then the curtains would go up over it, okay? But they would set it inside, and then they'd put the walls in. So that alone, just thinking of this, how many, I don't know if they changed hands, they must have, there must have been some pretty hardy people to do all of this traveling. They complained a lot about it, so that must have been bad. But anyway, the whole thing was that Korah had a very important role. They had the next most responsible role after Eleazar. Because Eleazar was not the high priest, he was the son of the high priest. He was in charge of making sure that everything left the way it was supposed to leave. And who would pack it, who would take down the curtains, and who did this, how that thing was placed, and how it would be moved. And so they had to follow that column of smoke out across the desert, or whichever direction they were going, hopefully northwest of some sort. And when that column of smoke stopped, those people that were miles and miles and miles back there might be 3 days behind them, or 4 days behind them, depending on how far back in the pack they were. They knew they were coming to the end of, coming to the end of the road and what was going to happen. And Eleazar had to be there to make sure that everything went back in the same order it was taken down. The first things that went down were the first things that went up, so that everything could be moved inside of it. So Korah, for some reason, maybe it was because he didn't like carrying, maybe he was stuck on the ark and it was a heavy load, I don't know. But for some reason, he felt that he should be on the same level with Moses, okay? So as we read through that, now I want to just make a point, and I hope you guys don't get me wrong. Like I said, everybody came from somewhere in the religious systems of the world, okay? And they're still coming from them, okay? And they're still going to them, and they're still leaving them and going way off to the side. So this world is in total chaos if you really want to look at it. I mean, according to the scriptures, and like I asked you that one day, what do you think this world looks like through Yahuwah's eyes? What do you look like through Yahuwah's eyes? Those are the important things that we have to think about. So when I went into the Old Testament, or into King James, one of the early versions, it was a revised version of the New Standard Version, or whatever they call it. One of the many new King James versions. They got several of them. When they talked about, they make very little light of things like the Ark of the Witness, or the menorahs, or these things. They make little light. Their thing, it seems like when they translated it, they were putting it into more of a man's view of it instead of what a biblical or the creator's view of it. So, like you've all heard David talk about the red letters, right? If you really, really think about it, Moses was told the whole story of Bereshit, of Genesis, from the beginning all the way up into Exodus, okay? So technically, the Creator was telling that story. That would have been all red letters. Leviticus today, if you put it into red letters, is 99%, or maybe even 100% red letter, because everything in there was written by the Creator, right? But how did the people that translated and wrote it never look at don't get me wrong, Yeshua, everything is in red letters in a red letter Bible, right? Everything that he says. But you don't see that nobody ever did that in the in the Torah. There was a reason for it. There's a reason for that because the people that translated the Bible, the New Testament, translated that as their form of what they wanted it to be. Many of them, many religions don't believe Yeshua has any deity at all. The Mormons do not believe there's any deity in him. He is just a man that was made, right? And so are the Jehovah's Witnesses the same way. There's no deity. He's just a man. You know, there's nothing holy about him. He was just a man with a good heart and a good person that did everything right. But when we look at it, we know who Yahushua was, Yeshua, because it tells us in John, the one that was rejected, and you can go to Samuel and find several instances where the Creator says, the people that rejected me. He was the one that was rejected, and he became flesh and walked among men. Yeshua. People don't read, but you wouldn't get that. Most people, when they translate, they say in the beginning, in John, in the beginning was the Word. Oh, that's Yeshua. And the Word was with God, that's Yeshua. And the Word is God, that's Yeshua. Right? And they go down and they read it and they just go right past it after that. The word in Yeshua's name is exactly what he is, deliverance. So when you see in the Bible where it says, look back at your Savior or look back at your deliverance, they're looking back at what Yeshua did. That was and what did he come to do? He come to deliver us from the penalty of sin that was created in the garden so that we would have eternal life. He's delivering us back to the eternal life that we lost when we come out of the garden. It's a little bit off the subject, but we have to look at when I'm reading these things and I'm looking at it, I really get into these things about today. You know, what are we doing today? Anyway, I got off the subject a little bit. And sometimes I do that. Too bad Valerie doesn't come so she can laugh at me going through my pages. So if I'm one of those pages, I write notes, and I can remember most everything I write, but sometimes I have to look to make sure I'm staying on it. So when we look at this thing with the rebellion, so Yahuwah sets up a plan. Moses was the one that said, if these people are wrong, open the earth and swallow them, right? Well, they swallowed 250 people, right? And the men that were standing with him were burned up. If you read it real closely, they were burned up by their incense that they had on their fire holders, okay? And I read it 3 times, and so it said the people that were in the tents, their families, all of their cattle, all of those men were buried alive in the earth, and the men were burnt down. They were struck down just like the men that went into the Nadab and Abital, that went into and brought strange fire into the Holy of Holies. So 250 people went in and died. That was not even enough, because the Creator then went and he said he was going to send a plague and wipe all the people out, okay? And if you notice that Moses took Aaron into the tent, into the Holy of Holies, and took incense off of the altar, which would have been the incense of altar, the one that's inside the tabernacle, inside where the Ark of the Witness is, took that fire and ran through the crowd, okay? And 14,000 people died before he got through the crowd. The importance of that incense was that was the Creator's, that was man's prayers going up. If you read Revelation, that's what that is. That's our prayers going up. That's what that represents, that sweet odor. We look at it as something, some kind of perfume or something, but it's what that meaning of that is, it's a picture of the prayers of the saints going up to the Creator, okay? And that's the design of what it was. It was always set up the way, if you read it, he wanted that incense on there morning and night. What does he tell us in the Shema? When we're talking about everything that he does, we're supposed to tell us to their children. Those are prayers, right? That's what we're teaching them to do. So that incense is an important thing. So when they grabbed that and put it in his fire holder and he ran through the crowd, that took the plague away as he went through. People were dying in front of him, but when he got through, the plague stopped, okay? So the Creator, I don't know how many times did he tell Moses he wanted to wipe them all out. I never counted them, but there's been a few times in there. But I don't think it was ever that. It was a picture of what he wanted to do. He wanted righteous people. All of these people that were there during Korach's time, that were over 20 years old, never made it into the promised land, because later on we see when they go in to spy out the land, the curse that went upon them, and they were going to be out there for 40 years, right? So those people never made it. They were all, even though the fire never really took them out, they were taken out, okay? So the only people it didn't touch was the high priesthood, which was Aaron, Moses. Well, Aaron died before he got to the promised land, and so did Moses. But those people, Eleazar and his son, they made it through, and so did all of those priesthoods. All the people that was carrying the items, part of the priesthood was not included in that. They were never considered part of the children of Israel. They were set apart to the Creator. If you remember he was their inheritance, is the way he put it. Okay? So those people all made it through. But those people that were there at Korah, the ones that come along in chapter 17, when we see the deal with Aaron's rod, because the Creator wasn't done with them. So he says, I'm going to do this with this rod. And so he got a rod for each person, told Moses, put their name on it, take Aaron's rod, put his name on it, and lay him before the ark of the witness. Well, they call it the witness, or the testimony in some Bibles, it's the same thing. Lay him on the ground tonight, and in the morning we'll go in there. And so when they went in the morning, and this was whoever rod that the Creator picked, was the person that he put in charge, and it was a picture for all of the people, right? So that rod happened to be Aaron's rod. It sprouted leaves, it sprouted blossoms, and it gave fruit of almonds, okay? So that was a picture to those people that, Dad, burn it. Can't you guys get it through your head? These are the people that I have in charge. I don't need you to keep trying to outguess me. Look at this. So where did he take that rod? It was put in the ark of the witness. Now, if we read in Hebrews 9, we're going to see that when they describe the tabernacle, they call it a temple. But you have to remember, in Greek, the word in Greek for temple is sanctuary. Okay, so technically, the mistranslation, if they had done it in Hebrew, if you have a Peshat, an Aramaic New Testament, it does say tabernacle. It doesn't say temple, because they translated it into the Hebrew or the Arabic. So anyway, there's three things in there, right? You guys remember the three things that are in the Ark of the Witness?
The jar of manna, the Aaron's rod,
and the broken tablets.
yeah.
Okay. And you know, we have to the tablets we have to remember, okay? Moses threw them down and they broke, right? It doesn't say anything about them, but do you think any way, shape, or form that those would be laying out in the desert somewhere? And they just walked over them and left them? They were put in the Ark of the Witness. That's why it was called the Ark of the Witness. because it's a witness for and against the children of Israel. Those tablets went in there because they broke the covenant. They broke the covenant with the Creator that they just made a couple of days before, when they said, all you say, they didn't say it, but they told Moses, all Yahuwah says we will do. Just don't let him talk to us anymore. Right? But they even said that before that. One time before, all he says we will do. So they broke that covenant. Do you know that if we're the ancestors, if our ancestors were part of that, which very well could be, because according to mathematics and what John's had, that at the end of time there's going to be half of the world population that's going to be the house of Israel. They were living people. They might not be of the house, but they will be people that face the white throne judgment. And the white throne judgment, if you make it there, you have eternal life, if you read the scriptures, okay? You don't get judged and go to hell, because there's no hell. If you get there and your name is not in the Lamb's Book of Life, then you've already been prejudged, and you just go into the lake of fire, and you're disintegrated. You're no more. There's no suffering and gnashing of teeth for the eternity, okay? Hell and brimstone or whatever it is that they preach. You're gone, you're not there anymore, okay? So, those people, the importance of that rod was to show the people, it was a witness to the people. It wasn't against them, it was for them, but at the same time it was him holding the stick against them to say, look this is what I want from you. This is whom I picked, this is my people. So that went in, that part was laid back into the Ark of the Witness. So you had the manna, the urn of manna, that when before the witness was even made, he says, take that and we'll put it before the witness, okay? Or maybe the translation would be, put it as a witness, okay? So when the Ark of the Witness was made, that was one of the first things that Moses put into it, other than the tablets, was the jar of manna. And then the last thing that went in was Aaron's rod. So, and if you read 20 different translations of that chapter 9 in Hebrews, you're going to get people that'll say, well, all the covenants went away. You know, and I don't mean to get off track there, but the covenant that went away was the Levitical covenant, that was the priesthood that they're talking about. If you go chapters before it, they're talking about the priesthood. Priesthood went away because it became illegitimate. There was no high priest. The last high priest that would have been a legitimate priest would have been Phinehas, okay? And after him would have been his son, and after him it would have been his firstborn and his firstborn. But that never happened. David picked a priest, a high priest, or not David didn't, Solomon did, okay? Solomon picked a priest. Out of the priesthood, he picked a priest. The one that was a priest when Yeshua was crucified wasn't even he wasn't even a Levite. His wife was a Levite, but he wasn't. He was picked. They used to bid for it was kind of like they were picked by the Caesar, or whoever was in charge at that time in Jerusalem. It was kind of like a job. If you hit right, maybe we'll do a little bargaining here and you can be the high priest. Okay. The last legitimate people in the priesthood was John's father. John the Baptist's father was the last one that you can really see was part of the priesthood. But he wasn't a high priest. He was just one that was in charge of tending the candles. And you got to remember that their ark was just a wooden box with 2 tablets in it, and there was no lid on it. It was a wooden box. Because Solomon's temple, when they built the temple, they built 2 giant cherubims out of gold, and they slid the box underneath it. Okay? And they pulled the curtain down and they left the sticks protruding so that everybody could see that it was in there. But all it was a box with the 2 tablets that Moses honed out and took to the Creator, and he wrote on with his finger. Huh?
The one without the lid.
I'm sorry?
The one without the lid.
Right. It was just a wooden box. There was no gold on it. And so, you know, the more you study that and you think about it, I was saying, I don't go on Facebook, I don't answer. The best thing you can get from me is a like, okay? You'll never get a thumbs down. I'll either like it or I'll like it, okay? For all you people. I don't make too many comments on it, but I got one on there and they were talking about somebody is digging under the, of course it's been going on for years, they're digging down under the Temple Mount looking for the Ark, because somebody's seen the Ark of the Covenant in there. Well, the Ark of the Covenant is a wooden box with 2 tablets in it. It's not this golden thing with the 2 cherubim on them. You know, the gold cherubim, the gold lid, and the gold box. It's not there, because if you read in Revelation, when John's vision is standing in the tent of meetings, and he's looking at the Creator sitting on it. Okay? So, that's what, because it just disappears in other scriptures. There's nothing in there. It's just all of a sudden there's nothing at Shiloh anymore. Okay? Anyway, all of these things that we have for witnesses for us, looking at the world today and looking at this rebellious bunch of people that we just got through talking about, it was 14,000 people died, okay? So I was thinking, look at the world. How come people aren't just dying? It's just like gobs of them dying, or, you know, because of all the things that are going, you know, how bad the world is, okay? Because the Bible isn't about, you know, like the United States is this sacred ground that we've been blessed, yes, okay? But we've been blessed for a purpose, so that we could all just go backwards, I guess, I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is that this world people should be dying all the time, right? And then I started thinking about it. I seen a deal the other day, it says like 250 people a day die in the United States just from car accidents. And something like 500 a day are dying from drug overdoses, or maybe more than that. Well, I said, that's just in the United States, okay? So in the normal year, and I haven't looked at it for about 5 years, the amount of people that die in the United States every year is about equal to how many people are born. We've been stagnated at like 530 some million people for quite a few years, I guess. How many people do you think would die in the world today? 8 billion people out there. Over 8 billion people in the world. Of all of that, how many people do you think would die in a day? I did the math on this with the 14,000 and using the 903,500 people that were there in the camp. Those were just men. So I put it up to 1.5 million, because I figured there's got to be at least enough women for all these dudes, right? So I put it up to 1.5 million, and it's probably more than that. But it's less than 1%. That 14,000 people was less than 1% of the people. It's just right. It's like 0.9 of 1%. So if you just took 1% of 8 billion people to die at one time, it's only 80,000 people. No, 80 million people a day or something like that are being taken out by the Creator because of the way they live and the way they think. Maybe. Huh? Because there's got to be something there. But it's just something, I'm giving this to you to think. This is John's brain working, okay? These are things that I think about. Why are we here? Why are we still here?
Because we're crazy.
Because we're blessed. And some of us are going to be blessed to live a long time, and some of us might die early. But we are blessed. Even though we're all sinners. But the one thing we've never done, we've never rejected him. That's never come across my mind. Even when even like when Carol thought she wasn't gonna marry me because she said, well, I can't marry you, you're not a Christian. I said, well, yeah, you're right, I'm not a Christian, but I'm a believer. She said, well, what do you believe in? I said, I believe in the Creator. She says, you believe in Jesus? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I believe. I said, I read the scriptures. I don't believe that what they say he did and what he done is that really happened, but that's just me. But I said, before you make any decisions, pray about it. I knew how to get to her. So anyway, going through this time and looking at all of this, I'm thinking, what's happening in this world today? But people are dying in the hundreds of thousands every day, all across the world. I'm going to try to figure out. I'm going to find out. Because it just hit me when I was packing my stuff up and putting this in there and going. In fact, I wrote down a real quick deal when I figured out, how many people had died, what percentage of the population. If there was 1.5 million people in the camp, it would have been less than 1%. It would be like 0.9%. So, in this world today, which brings me to my point, the Pope, the Vicar of Christ on earth. Think of that. That they would actually put that title on somebody, and they would actually have somebody accept it. That's blasphemous.
In direct opposition.
I mean, I'm not judging, I'm just saying what the
Right.
scriptures
In
tell me.
direct opposition to what scripture says.
It is. So, I've looked at it, there's nothing good in that church that I can see, except they've got a magic number because they've got 1.4 billion followers, supposedly. That's a lot of people. But it's only 1/8 of the population. But how many Christians, the rest of the world that are Christians? And what is it, there's over 1 billion Islams. I think there's 2 billion Islamic people. But I think that's the largest religion. And actually, when you guys think about this, Allah is the same Hebrew word, because Arabic is the closest alphabet to Hebrew there is, to the original Hebrew. Okay, not the Hebrew that we have today because of the added vowels and the vowel pointings. So there's actually 28 letters in the alphabet today. There's only really 22. But the Arabic that they use, Allah, is Elohim. And they just use that instead of God. So Allah, okay? They don't use the name Yahuwah, but they'll use the name Jesus, right? So there's 3 billion people. You got 2 billion Islamic and 1.4 billion or 1.4 billion, so you got 3.4 billion people in that group. So that leaves about 5 billion people, or there's probably there's got to be more than 8 billion. There's a lot of numbers up there. So how many people out there with all these different denominations that are calling themselves Christians? I'm going to call up that guy on one of their news shows that got all the answers. And I'm going to ask him how many there is out there Christians again. But you got it?
Well, AI says there are 2.4 billion people that will call themselves Christian. There are 1.9 billion people who call themselves Muslim, and 8,000 people die per day. Hold on.
It's got to be more than 8,000.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah, hold on.
I don't trust all that, but at least I'm
I'm
close
just
on
saying,
it.
yeah.
So there's 5 billion people out there somewhere that they're not all atheists and they're not all Democrats. you know? And I shouldn't say it because I'm a registered Democrat, but I don't vote that way, but, you know, I remember, I know I used to argue with my father-in-law who was a Republican, and he argued with me. I said, I don't look at that. I said, I'm a centralist person. And I says, I look at the person and look at what he can do for me. And that's how I voted. Martha?
It's 150,000 people die every day
In the world?
in the world, globally. And in the United States, almost 9,000 daily.
9,000 a day and 150, what'd you say?
150,000.
Okay, 150,000 people.
Oh.
So they had 14,000, we had 9,000 die a day in the United States, had 14,000 in one day, but that didn't happen every day. So that's, you know, that's not, when we start thinking about it. So is maybe, and I do believe this, the illnesses of the world that people have, the things that we have, all these things were created by man.
Yes.
But they were given to him by the Creator. He has ways of making plagues. And he can put those things in, and he makes these things happen. You know, I'm not saying he's up there got a little scorecard in doing this. He's just letting man do what he made man think for himself. Gave him the willpower to think for himself and to make decisions. And unfortunately, and I can include myself there, I made a lot of stupid decisions in my life, you know.
Oh, yeah, we all.
We all have. Yeah, right? And we've all sinned. You know that, I don't want to get off onto other things, but you know, I heard this one preacher was going on and he gave people those, they're going to hell. Scripture doesn't say that. Scripture says there won't be any of them in the kingdom.
Yeah.
But the first thing he says, there won't be any liars in the kingdom. How many of us have lied? Okay. So my point, when I told that preacher that, he was like, well, you don't know how to translate what, I go, there's your problem, buddy. I said, because he's looking at people and he's saying, in my kingdom, read Isaiah, the last few chapters, read Jeremiah, read Ezekiel, read all of them. In the very end, everybody is going to be pure. That's what's going to be in the kingdom. You're not going to be there until he personally circumcises each person's heart. Does that make sense? Because that's what the scripture says.
It's not gonna be flesh and blood either.
Huh?
We're not gonna be flesh and
Absolutely.
blood.
Yeah, because we're not going to have a fleshly heart.
No.
Okay? So we have to, but that's another point. Look what kind of teachings are out there for people. And I'm, you know, like I said, we all come from somewhere. When I was in the Mormon church, they had some strange things, you know, and so when the guy told me that Jesus wasn't a real character, that he was just a man that was created, I said, what Bible are you reading? I said, that's not even in the Book of Mormon, for crying out loud. And so those kind of things really, but I pulled up Korach from the King James Version, and it has all of the olive tops in it. And when you start going through there, when it gets over to talking about the punishment, it's like olive top, olive top, olive top, olive top. Like he was putting his signature on everything that Moses did, everything that Aaron did. His signature was on it. Even the things that Korah said, he put his name on it. Because he knew what he was going to say before he said it. And so he put it in there. He wants you to know that this was his doing. Okay? He wasn't making an example of Korah. Korah was a human being that had judgment, the ability to judge for himself, and that's what he did. Okay? And he just had that judgment. He thought he should be the same as Moses. Just like I'm sure that people have said in here and said, well, I should be like, wished I was like that, you know? I mean, Everybody's gotta say that once. Wished I'd be like somebody. So, anyway, I hope I didn't bore you, look at, I'm not a mean person. I love there's nobody in the world that I hate. I love everybody, okay? There's lots of people I don't like, but I still love them. I love them because they're human beings and they're God's creation, okay? And so that's what the scripture says. So, when I'm like I said, when I look at things, I don't probably look at, David told me I don't look at the scripture in normal ways. Because we used to have all these conversations, and he used to go, where do you come up with this stuff, you know? And I said, don't you ever think past what you're reading? We have to look at what we are today, where we're at. We're a small group of people, but we're all together. I mean, we all have different little thoughts in our heads about where things are right and what things are wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said before, this is not about a religion, it's about a relationship. And your relationship is special with him. He looks at your relationship special. He looks at mine as special, because each one of them is a special individual relationship.
Each relationship is unique, because that's how he created us.
Yeah.
We're all the same, only different.
Absolutely. And so that's my point. This is about relationships, and so that's why I look at religions in the way that I do. And I'm not trying to badmouth them, because they do some good, because they get people at least there so that they can come over here. And I think that's why we're here, okay? So anyway, hope it didn't bore you.
Carmen says, I wanna ask something.
Oh, it's time to
Yeah, if you-
receive the blessing.
John,
If you look in Ezra 7:1-5, you can trace the priesthood up from Ezra to Aaron.
From Ezra to Aaron. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
That's
There's
what you get.
there's always been a priestly
15
line.
people.
Huh?
15 people. 15 priests.
Yeah, there's always been a priestly line,
Yeah.
okay? And it even says that in the scriptures, but most people don't go back and look where it comes from and how it goes, okay? Yeah. So, but you're right, there's always, that's
But
what,
anyways, that's you
and
look for the
you have to remember
face,
that Korach,
go backwards. though.
yeah, Korach was in that priestly line.
Yeah, but
Because-
then he was not from Aaron.
That's right, but he
Well,
was
we
still
know,
in
but
the,
then
he
after
was
the-
not a priest of the high order,
Right.
but he was a priest in the situation that he was in because of his father, or because of his grandfather,
Right.
because his grandfather was in a priestly line. Okay, very good, I'm glad you brought
Son
that
of
up.
Levi, yeah.
All right, time to receive the
Now it's
blessing.
time.
We're asked to see the blessing.
But,
Okay.